show that taper fade very well. The one thing I really like about Lil Baby's dreadlocks and his hair is that he maintains it quite often, which is kind of the flip side of how his dreadlocks originally started. He did start out somewhat of a semi-freeform, although he did have his sections created. And of course, if you want to see the whole process on how he actually got his dreadlocks, you can watch my first video on Lil Baby. But a quick rundown, he does have a 4B hair type, which is very suitable and very easy for those with the 4B hair type to get dreadlocks. And the reason it's more suitable and it's actually easier is because the curl pattern is tighter, which then allows the hair to lock up easier. Not only that, but the hair is locking up on its own a whole lot faster. That's why we see a lot of people with that 4B or even the 4C hair type starting out with some sort of semi-freeform, allowing the hair to lock up on its own, and then going in with twisting with gel and other hairstyles and other methods after that. And that's what we see with Lil Baby. We also seen this with Sway Lee as well. If you guys remember, he started out with the semi-freeform style and then went in shortly after with twisting with gel and then maintaining the hair with doing other hairstyles. But the way Lil Baby does his braids are just so clean and very well put together. Now, of course, you can do this yourself as long as you learn how to do the braids. You can also do barrel whirls or barrel twists, depending on what you want to call them. I've also done tutorials on that as well if you want to watch the XXXTentacion hairstyle tutorial. But one thing you'll notice about Lil Baby's dreadlocks is that all of his sections are exactly the same size. And this is what you want to do if you want to create hairstyles later on in the future. So keep that in mind when starting out your dreadlocks if you haven't started yet. You want to make your sections all the same size, which makes it a whole lot easier to actually even do hairstyles. And like I mentioned before, he does have a nice clean taper fade. It's almost like a South of France because it does go around the sides and over his ears, and overall just gives it a really clean look. And with his dreadlocks being cylindrical, all of his sections being the same exact size, allows for his hairstyles to be symmetrical and all of his braids to be the same size as well. And on the flip side of that, we do see him with his hair outside of the hairstyle. And just how I kind of mentioned before with him starting out with the semi-freeform style and then moving into very maintained hair. Now, of course, as time goes on and everything progresses, we're able to see his hair become more mature with him getting more tight. But at the same time, he still does have very thick dreadlocks, even with his sections being quite small. Now, how does that happen? This can happen many ways. I'm going to tell you one that is very relatable to myself because that is exactly what I did. You start out with twisting with gel. So first off, you have to start out by sectioning the hair. And with sectioning the hair, you're creating your dreadlock size. Now, even if you were to create small sections, those dreadlocks in the beginning stage to where they're trying to butt up and then lock up are going to tend to turn out a little bit thicker than after your hair is already locked up and it progressively starts to lock up. Let me hope that makes sense. The initial locking phase, which is the first phase of actually dreadlocking, there are three which I'll mention here shortly. But that initial locking phase tends for the hair to actually butt up a little bit more because the hair is not tight whatsoever. So the hair is going to butt up as much as it needs to in order for it to actually lock up. And butting is essentially the hair expanding and contracting and finding places to lock up. Now, like I mentioned, there are three phases of dreadlocks, and that is the initial locking, that is the budding, and then that is the maturing phase, or the completely locked up phase. Those are the three big phases. And the cool thing about Lil Baby is we're seeing the complete transformation of his hair, especially from the first video I did on him. That's what I really like about these videos, is I'm able to actually see the progression of these people's hair, and it inspires me. Now, my first dreadlock inspiration was actually Neen Williams, if anybody knows him. And then eventually around the time that I actually got dreadlocks, my biggest inspiration was Jaden Smith. And when it came to my first set of dreadlocks, they mostly resembled Neen Williams and Jaden Smith. Mostly leaning towards Jaden Smith, of course, because that was my actual inspiration at the time. And this time around, my biggest inspiration is Lil Baby because his dreadlocks resemble what I really want my dreadlocks to look like. And overall, I feel like the hairstyles he does just look very well, especially with the full set of dreadlocks. Now, of course, he does have a taper fade, but I would still consider this a full set. I feel like this photo right here really shows how well maintained his hair is now. And it just goes to show that no matter what you've done with your dreadlocks before, if you start maintaining it or if you start doing something to it, all it takes is for you to continue to do it in order for it to look the way that you want it to. That's the thing about dreadlocks. It's just a constant act of doing something in order for it to get from point A to point B. Even if we take dreadlocks in general as a whole, dreadlocks are essentially you creating the section and you holding that section for as long as possible in order for it to actually lock up. And you hold it as long as possible by doing methods. Whether it is twisting the gel, whether it is two-strand twist, whether it is instant locking using the Dreadlocks crochet hook, or even interlocking using the Dreadlocks interlock tool, And there's so many other methods you can choose. But right here we're able to see how his hair looks maintained being outside of a hairstyle. But this is why I give so much credit to actually doing hairstyles with dreadlocks, because it not only helps mature the hair and not only makes your hair look good, but it's helping tighten up the dreadlocks and helping the process go a lot smoother without you having to use duck clips and rubber bands and so on and so forth, of things that don't really bring style to your hair but are definitely a necessity, because you want to hold a position for a really long time in order for that hair to lock up. Now here's a quick flashback for a reminder for everyone out there that his hair did start out kind of a semi-freeform. Although he did have the dreadlock tips initiated, there still wasn't really any sectioning. And even if you look at the back of the head, it doesn't look like there's any sectioning at all. And all of that was done afterward. And guys, now we're able to see how awesome his dreadlocks are actually coming together. And it's just simply doing these hairstyles. And this is honestly one of my favorite hairstyles I've seen from him. And this is one of the first times I've actually seen 3 braids pulled off very well. But you guys, I want to hear what your guys' thoughts are down below. So make sure to comment down below.